Alright, so Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a worldwide franchise. There's popular anime, Master Duel is gaining more and more attention, overall the game is being played at the most highly competitive levels, and YCSs are seeing record-breaking attendance. But even now, if you mention Yu-Gi-Oh! To someone that does not really know it, the first couple of things that are going to pop into their minds is Pot of Greed, Dark Magician, Exodia, Egyptian God cards, and Blue Eyes. And if we're being completely honest, Blue Eyes has been kind of a meme in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community for the longest time, except that one random time it won Worlds in 2016. But besides that, it was kind of just a bad archetype. It was bricky, it was awkward, didn't really do much, but now it got a structure deck. And we all know what happens when decks get structure decks. Like, just think about Solomon Grade and the likes. Structure decks, branded also. Structure decks really do make a difference. And would you believe me if I was to tell you that Blue Eyes is going to be among the top meta decks in the format? And that's why I'm making this video, because you have to know how to beat it. Now, if you enjoy these types of videos, please make sure to give it a like. And if you're not subbed yet, make sure you are subbed and also ding the bell so you are notified when I post. It helps the channel, helps me with the algorithm and stuff. And of course, I'm here to relay all this important info, so it's also gonna help you in return. So with that being said, let's jump into the video and let's talk about the cards that beat Blue Eyes. Now, what is actually going to make this deck competitive? You can see a couple topping deck lists on the screen because people have already started to do well with this deck. And with the help of this, I will be explaining some support cards to you quickly so you can be on the same page with me and know what's going on with the deck and why there's the need for me to make this video. It's gonna be a good deck. So what happened is they decided to print a couple really good support cards in the structure deck. And as you can see by the deck list on the screen, Blue Eyes is most likely going to be played with Primite cards. If you're unfamiliar with Primite cards by now, it is essentially an archetype that relies on vanilla monsters. Most of their effects get effects because you have a vanilla either on the field or in the graveyard. It is an archetype with a great grind game because of Barrow, which is going to return to your hand every single time in the standby phase. If a certain condition is fulfilled, it's going to be fulfilled most of the time. And Primite the Drill Beam is one of the most broken cards right now. Actually, it is so good. And with the help of this archetype, you are always going to be able to bridge into Blue Eyes, which is obviously a vanilla. So this just helps Blue Eyes become a mid-range deck. And in this format right now, what we need are mid-range decks with a good grind game. And what's another engine that's great at grind game? You guessed it, it is Fiendsmith. You can also include Fiendsmith cards in Blue Eyes if you want to, so these are going to be the top two versions, Primite and Fiendsmith. There might be people also mixing the two. I'm unfamiliar with the most, edgy builds. Like, you can do a lot of things, but for the most part, I've just been seeing either or. But there are 60 card piles out there, so just keep an eye out for that. With that being said, let's talk about some of the support cards. They got Maiden of White, which is really good. It is a card that sends itself from hand to grave to place a True Light from hand, deck, or graveyard face up, like in your spell and trap card zone. And that's really important because I don't know if True Light was searchable before, but now you can easily access it, and it is a really important part of your deck. You can see it on the screen, you can read the effect for yourself, and sort of get the gist of what's going on here. They also have a new card called Wishes for Blue Eyes. It is a card that discards one card and adds a level 1 Light Tuner and one spell trap that mentions Blue Eyes White Dragon from the deck to the hand. So it is a double search. Broken, gets all your plays going. And then it's got another effect. There's Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon, which says that your opponent cannot banish cards from your graveyard. And then when a card or effect is activated on the field, as a quick effect, you can negate the activation. If you do, it gains attack. So just Omni Negate. It is really good because it helps you with follow-up, as when it's destroyed, it's able to special summon a light dragon monster from your grave, which is super important. And overall, what you're gonna do is you're gonna play this deck very mid-rangey. You're just gonna put up a couple interruptions, and then you're gonna tag out Synchro Summon into the Ultimate Spirit Dragon during the opponent's turn, and you can also Synchro Summon into many other things. You're gonna disrupt them with hand traps, which you play about 17 non-engine in this deck, which is quite a lot. That's pretty much the gist of it. There's also Roar of the Blue-Eyed Dragons, which special summons a Blue-Eyes monster in defense position from deck, grave, or banishment, which is really important, as there are cards like Bestios, spoiler, that are good against this deck, but you can bring out your Blue-Eyes back from the banish pile, which is really important. So yes, that's pretty much it. There's also the Trap card, which is able to destroy an equal number of cards your opponent controls for the amount of Blue Eyes White Dragon in your hand, face-up, monster zone, and or graveyard. And you can show up to 3, so you can pop up to 3. The deck is gonna be a mid-range deck. At least I think this is the way it has to be played, because it's gonna lose to the least amount of things if this is the way people approach it. So with that, let us jump into my little list of cards that counter this deck. So we talked about the Double Search spell card, which you definitely have to Ash. I think this just goes without saying. This deck can also play Dominus Purge. Not a lot of decks can run it, but if you can run it, you have got to hit that card as well. And of course, since we're talking about beating Blue Eyes, a lot of you are also going to be playing Blue Eyes, so it's important to keep that in mind in the mirror match. And then at the end of the video, I'm also going to give you a little important tip for the mirror match, so stay tuned for that. Moving on, we have Impulse. Impulse is good because you can hit many different things depending on the situation. You're gonna see your hand, decide how you want to disrupt your opponent depending on the hand traps that you draw. And with Impulse, you can either hit the Lordly Load effect to special summon, you can hit the spell card that summons back a Blue Eyes, you can also hit Maiden of White, which is going to try and revive itself from the graveyard every time you special summon a Blue Eyes White Dragon. And moving on, but still staying on topic of Maiden, you can use Bestios. And that's what I was talking about before. You are trying to prevent that Maiden from special summoning back. It's gonna be very annoying and it's gonna give you a lot of bodies if you don't deal with it immediately and prevent it from special summoning itself back every single time, because it does not get banished when it leaves the field. So if you remove it with a Bestio, that's really good. You can also try and remove Blue Eyes cards. Now, why is that still good? It's because of Barrel. Because during your standby phase, if you have a normal monster in your graveyard or on your field, you're able to add Barrel back. So if you cut them access from normal monsters, they're just gonna be behind. And that is very vital, but they can get it back with the spell card. So just keep that in mind. Moving on to some other cards. Let's talk about Valor and Impermanence. So I would not say those two cards have very high impact. However, you can try and hit either Sage with Eyes of Blue or Spirit with Eyes of Blue. This is a new Link 1, which gets them access to the field spell, and the field spell grants them additional normal summons, and it's just a very good card to have in rotation. So you can hit that. However, with targeting negation, that does not destroy as well. It just makes it so they're gonna keep all the bodies, and what they can do with the bodies is Seals, which is really annoying. Seals is a bounce. It also brings out another dragon, which is usually going to be a Blue Eyes, so their Primite Drill Beam is also live, so keep that in mind. It's just overall going to be kind of an annoying deck, because you have to keep in mind the Primite side of things as well as the Blue Eyes side of things all the time, and there might be Fiendsmith cards as well in the mix. Now, since we're talking about Fiendsmith cards, Nibiru is an interesting card in this matchup, mainly because if your opponent is good, they're gonna try and play conservatively, and they're not gonna play into Nibiru because you don't have to play this deck like a crazy explosive combo deck or something like that. Where Nibiru can come in handy is if they play Fiendsmith, they're gonna force you to use it, so there's that, you cut them access. And on the topic of Fiendsmith, you can also Ash Requiem if you want to, if you don't want to give them access to the Fiendsmith side of things, or just like, if you top deck Ash, you can also Ash the Paradise effect if they play it, so just keep all of that in mind. But moving back to Nibiru, You can use it on their crackback, which is really good because a lot of times Nibiru on a crackback is just gonna punish everyone since some of them don't play around it, which I think, just as a side note, you can always almost try and play around Nibiru, at least for the most part. It does depend on the deck that you play, but right now in this meta, I don't think you should be losing to Nibiru unless you're desperately trying to go for a game. But in a grind game format, you don't necessarily have to try and desperately go for game because you're gonna play a back and forth game, and if you manage your resources well, you should be fine. So Nibiru might be a hit or miss, but it's good if you pair it with hand traps, like just let them do the Fiendsmith combo and then pair it with Impermanence or something. That's when it can really shine. Now, moving on, let's talk about Charmies. So Charmies are kind of similar to Nibiru because it's gonna depend on how badly your opponent wants to play. Now, you can use Fuvalos, it's gonna be good, it's gonna give you a couple draws. However, your opponent can just decide to play very conservatively and they might not give you as many draws, and then Fuvalos is not really gonna have enough impact. And it's very similar with Purulia as well as Meows, because sure, you might be able to get a draw, but it's gonna depend on what engine they play with. So let's say you try and use Purulia and they have the Fiendsmith cards, they might just play with those. Or they have the Primite cards, they might just play with those, maybe give you one draw with normal summon barrels. So yeah, like it's not gonna be ideal. Meows is very similar. And since I just mentioned Barrow, I also wanna say you might want to Veiler or Impermanence that as well, just to cut them access from other Primite cards. So keep that in mind as well. Moving on to Shifter. Shifter is good because they do most of the stuff from the graveyard. They're gonna summon the Maiden back. They're gonna have Barrel and Blue Eyes and all of that in the grave. They have the spell card, which is able to fusion summon if you banish it from the graveyard. So they have a lot of resources there. Shifter is good, but it's just gonna depend on what deck that you play where you can actually incorporate Shifter. It's not a lot of decks, but if you can play it, you probably should use it. Then we have Droll. Droll, deck lockdown, all of these cards. What I've seen is it can be decent because they might start Sage and try to get to the Fuse spell and then just go from there, or like go spell card into Sage and then you cut them access from the Sage search. So with all of that in mind, Droll can be good, but it does not completely annihilate them. It's not like Droll against Mitsurugi or something where they really cannot play for the most part. So I would keep it in mind. I don't think it's terrible, but I also don't think it's broken either. Moving on, we have Ogre. Now, Ogre is really cool, actually, and it's getting more and more popularity because it's good against meta decks as well. You can use it on Duel, you can use it against Malice, on Lizardos or something, and it's also good against Blue Eyes. What you're trying to do is you're trying to hit True Light. The True Light effect, when it's destroyed and in the grave, it's gonna pop your entire field. So with that being said, you can Ogre it, and you can try to capitalize on them blowing up their entire field. However, their spirit is able to negate a card effect in the graveyard, so they can negate their own card from destroying their field. So keep that in mind, but you still want to Ogre the trap card because it's just very annoying when it's in rotation. So do with that info what you will. And let's move on to some going second cards like Harpies and Lightning Storm, which are actually really good because they have a lot of back row, and the back row is mainly what's going to give them follow-up. So you want to cut them access from that completely, or at least bait a Drill Beam, so then you can continue playing and clear your field, their field that way. There's also Ultimate Slayer and Metaltronos. They are incredibly specific cards. For Metaltronos, you would have to play like a specific package. You might have some targets, like if they also play Bestios and Lubellion, for example, you could play Metaltronos in Raizu, and then your Metaltronos target would be Eclipse Twins, which is like decent. I just don't think it's that broken, and Ultimate Slayer is kind of very similar. I would say you would much rather stop them with hand traps and then deal with their half board. And then moving on to the last card I want to cover, it's Super Polymerization, which is actually really, really good because you can easily make Mud Dragon with their cards. And if you can afford to run Super Polymerization, I would highly suggest you do so. But now we're not done with the video yet. I promised you a little tip. with the mirror match. So what I've seen, I watched a couple mirror matches, and I would say Primite Drill Beam is one of the most important cards to use in that matchup. And why that is because you want to wait for your opponent to use their Drill Beam, so then you use your Drill Beam and you also banish it. Drill Beam is gonna reset itself every single time if you control a Primite card, like the monster, the barrel. So you're basically going to get access to barrel every single time because you have vanillas in the graveyard. From barrel, you're going to get access to the Drill Beam, so every single time you're going to have to deal with the Drill Beam. But if you wait for your opponent to use theirs and then you chain yours if you have it, banish their Drill Beam, their grind game just became much worse than yours. So yes, major tip for the mirror match, don't preemptively use your Drill Beam because they're going to use theirs if they're good. So there's that. That's all for today. Hopefully I covered enough. So your matchup against this deck is going to be a little easier. But if there's something that I have failed to mention, because I only did go through a couple hand traps and some of the most staple cards, feel free to do so in the comments down below and let me know what I missed. And if you're playing this deck, if you're familiar with any builds and all, I would love to have a discussion in the comments with you guys. And you can also help others if they jump in the comments and read through them. So please share all of your thoughts and all the information in the comments down below, and make sure to like the video since it really helps the channel. It makes me really happy. So please do that. But yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.